Well, good morning and good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to today's digital dialogue hosted by Veloz. Today's topic is the Roadmap to the Future, California's National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, more commonly known as NEVI. My name is Josh Boone, and I'm the Executive Director here at Veloz and the moderator for today's discussion. Today, we have the privilege of being joined by two California superheroes from the lead NEVI agencies here in California. California State Transportation Agency Secretary Omishakin and Commissioner Patty Monahan from the California Energy Commission. Before we have them join us, I'm going to provide a quick overview on Veloz and then set the stage for today's conversation. But before we jump in, we'll be taking audience questions at the end of today's discussion, so please use the Q&A box to pose those questions at that time. As many of you know, Veloz believes that the future is electric for all. All vehicles are electric, all people, corporations, and agencies who want or need a car or truck can and do choose electric, and that all that energy that powers these vehicles is carbon-free. Veloz is led by a high-powered, diverse, and well-networked group of action leaders from key sectors and Fortune 500 companies, public agencies, and nonprofits, uniquely able to accelerate the shift to the electrification of transportation. Programs like today's digital dialogue are generously funded by our members, and we offer them a heartfelt thank you for giving us the ability to convene world-class speakers and to discuss timely and important topics about electrifying transportation. This year, we had over 2,500 industry experts and advocates join our roster of digital dialogues and summits, and it's all thanks to Veloz members. So let's get to the heart of the matter and why we're all gathered here today to talk about the NEVI plan, what it took to put this plan together, and how we can be prepared for the rollout. And importantly, how this funding will be deployed as part of an integrated and holistic strategy that will include investments in light, medium, and heavy-duty zero-emission vehicles. The NEVI formula and subsequent planning all started with the signing of the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act, known as IIJA, by President Joe Biden on November 15th, 2021. At its core, the purpose of NEVI funding is to provide nearly $5 billion of funding to states to strategically deploy EV charging infrastructure and to establish an interconnected network to facilitate data collection, access, and reliability. This goal will be met through the creation of a convenient, affordable, reliable, and equitable network of charging throughout the country. California's 5-year, $384 million NEVI plan, prepared by Caltrans and the California Energy Commission, was submitted to the federal government in August of this year and approved fully in September of this year. Right after that, in October, the federal government approved the NEVI plans for all 50 states, plus Puerto Rico and DC, totaling more than $1.5 billion in the first phase to help build EV chargers, covering approximately 75,000 miles of highways across the United States. We are anticipating that the first solicitation in California will be released in Q1 of 2023. So today's conversation will include discussions around the plan itself, but it will also include the functional implementation so we can get ready for this exciting program. I think the most profound way to succinctly talk about the impact of NEVI is to quote President Biden when he said, "The next great American road trip is going to be fully electrified," and that's pretty exciting. So with all the background in mind, we are thrilled today to be joined by two esteemed guests who are here to dig deep into the topics of NEVI because they are from the very lead agencies who are planning and implementing NEVI here in California. California State Transportation Agency Secretary Omishakin and the California Energy Commissioner Patty Monahan. Both the Secretary and the Commissioner are deeply engaged in our work here at Veloz, and we thank them. So I'd now like to invite the Secretary and the Commissioner on camera and off mute. And I'd like to invite you each to introduce yourself. So maybe we can start with you, Secretary Omishakin, and then we'll go to Commissioner Monahan.
Thanks, Josh. Can you hear me well? Loud and clear?
Yes, loud and clear.
Good. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to join this webinar. Really excited to share a little bit about our outlook from the transportation space on everything ZEV and everything NEVI. I want to say before I introduce myself, kudos to Josh and Muni, the entire team there at Veloz, for all the work that you've been doing in this space. The only downside so far I can say is that when you said there was going to be a fireside chat, I was expecting a hot chocolate delivery this morning and some marshmallows or something. No delivery yet, Josh. So hopefully that's en route.
Frosty got stuck outside, I think, Secretary, with his hot cocoa.
And also, it's good to be with Commissioner Monahan. She and I go back to we were colleagues on this issue as President Biden was coming on board. We were working together on the transition team for President Biden, Vice President Harris. So it's always good to connect with the commissioner. So for me, been secretary for 10 months now. Prior to that, I was director of Caltrans, the largest state DOT in the country that's involved in everything from major highway projects, transit-related projects, active transportation related projects for the state. Transition from that responsibility, Governor gave me the opportunity to serve in the state Senate as well, to serve as secretary. As secretary, we oversee in this agency 8 departments in addition to Caltrans. Some of the ones that people are very familiar with are probably CHP, the DMV, and high-speed rail as well. So we are the oversight entity for 8 departments, boards, and commissions, and pushing forward with a lot of the big goals that the state has. And very importantly, one of them, no doubt, is climate, and this effort around NEVI very much fits into that. So excited to partner with people like Commissioner Monahan and Veloz to move that agenda forward.
Great. Patty, do you want to give a little background and introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Patty Monahan, Commissioner at the California Energy Commission and lead for transportation. And actually, as the Secretary was talking, I was taken back to being on the transition team, and the fact that the Department of Transportation is now so involved in promoting electric zero-emission transportation is really transformative. I mean, just to take a moment to think about the fact that DOT has never really been involved in advancing zero-emission mobility at a deep level, kind of sometimes at a very surface level, and the Secretary can tell me if I'm getting this wrong. And now we're seeing just kind of, at least from this administration, full-throated support. And that is quite different. I would also reflect on the fact that, at least when it comes to transportation and many other issues, we often have this kind of love-hate relationship with the federal government. We love them when there's somebody in the White House who believes in climate change and acts to, collaborates with California on advancing a clean energy agenda. We don't like them when they try to take away California authority to set vehicle standards, when they undermine our actions to reduce climate forcing pollution. And it's just wonderful right now to have an ally in the White House. It's wonderful to have funding, not just words, but actual money on the table to advance zero emission transportation. And, so it's just, for those of us in the trenches, it feels like, oh, finally, it's not just California acting, it's the federal government, it's many states, and it's not just blue states or purple states, it's red states that are working on this as well. And so I do think this is a transformative moment. These funds are going to supplement, the federal funds are really going to supplement what California is doing. Just yesterday, we passed a clean transportation plan at the Energy Commission that allocates $2.9 billion towards zero emission transportation, mostly in building out infrastructure. So, together with the fund money that the California, the legislature and the governor are putting forward, and the federal government, we have a real chance to make a difference.
Congratulations on your big action yesterday. That's pretty exciting.
Thank you. It is exciting.
I feel like we need a wine glass to chew.
I know, it's a kind of a remarkable amount. It's 30 times more than we were giving out in 2019 for clean transportation. 30 times more. It's pretty remarkable, the shift in just a couple of years.
So let's go back to the beginning when we first learned about NEVI funding. We were all interested in knowing, what it took to put this together and what it was like for your agencies when it got approved. So let's go to you, Secretary Omishakin. Did you have any warning this was coming your way? Was it an all hands on deck, or were your teams prepared for this type of effort? All of us know what it's like to have annual work plans. I mean, did this set yours on fire? Tell us a little about it.
To a certain extent, yes. There was a lot of excitement, like the commissioner is alluding to. There was a lot of excitement just in general about the fact that the federal government was now finally asking us to move forward with a plan. We had a little bit of a heads up because Commissioner and I, like I mentioned, we work pretty closely with the Biden administration and their ongoing efforts in this place. But the reason why our sort of hairs weren't necessarily on fire, so to speak, is because California has long been a leader in this space. I think people are aware of that. Even prior to Governor Newsom, Governor Brown was kind of leading the nation in this effort. When Governor Newsom came into office, he just essentially just more than doubled down on the importance of this space. And not only has helped set the standard for the country, but even countries around the world are following our lead now in what we're doing. And two things I can reference that kind of helped us be more prepared for putting the plan together are the two executive orders that he put out in consecutive years during Climate Week in September. In September of 2019, EO 1919 came out from Governor Newsom that set forth the goal to have 5 million ZEVs on the road by 2030, 40% reduction in GHG below 1990 levels by the year 2030. So all the big goals kind of started in EO 1919. If people who are listening in and not familiar with it, it's definitely an executive order they should check out. But the game changer EO that all of us know about is EO 7920. And that's the one that said all passenger vehicles by the year 2035 sold in California need to be some form of a ZEV. And industry, from the charging industry to the automotive industry, everybody was just going crazy. The rest other states started saying, well, what in the world is happening in California? They got so much attention. So the fact that the governor came out with that, and CARB and CEC and Caltrans and all these entities in the state were saying, okay, what's our role in this? We were a little bit ahead of the Biden administration coming out with IIJA that required each state to put a plan together. I don't want to take any of the talking points the commissioner may have, but I think, look, they told us to put it together by August 1st, I think was the plan. And Caltrans, Tony Dang, and at CEC, Hannon, Rasul, I think were our leads. And we got it in before August 1st. We were on time and ready to go. I think we got it in at the end of July. And we got the plan approved by September. We were one of the first plans that I think the federal government turned around and said, you're ready to rock and roll. So, there was a lot of excitement. We were ready to go, but the groundwork through the leadership from Governor Newsom in this space to get us going and essentially lead the country already anyway in this space, I think had us more than prepared to take this on.
That's fantastic. And it helps too that you both were appointed in these leadership roles, pushing the plan forward. So thank you for that. Let's go to you, Commissioner Monahan. So the Energy Commission, as you noted in your opening remarks, has been funding and managing transportation corridor electrifications for years now, right? Did your team have a vision in mind if this money were to come down the pike, or was it like totally new kind of art of the possible?
It wasn't totally new. I mean, we've been actually told by the legislature and the governor to evaluate charger needs through 2030. And we published an analysis of charger needs about a year and a half ago. We'll be updating it actually in the coming year. And, our analysis showed that we needed to rapidly scale up infrastructure. We have about 80,000 chargers now. We need 1.2 million for light duty vehicles by 2030. And I want to emphasize, some of the chargers we have available today are not going to make it through 2030. They're going to need to be replaced. They're going to need to be upgraded. So it's really like we need a massive scale up in infrastructure. And our team has been funding programs to do this, for a long time. And we're ready. I think we've developed the in-house expertise to move quickly to manage this sort of grant portfolio. And charging along infrastructure corridors the federal funding is really going to help us when it comes to meeting our statewide goals. With this funding, which is going to be really focused on DC fast charging, specific transportation corridors where there's a gap, really focusing in on communities that right now don't have any access or have very limited access. And I think particularly of communities that are more rural, where there's long expanses, and having rapid charging is really going to make a difference. And the funding that we now have from the state and from the governor, we can use to tailor for really targeted needs to make sure that this is an equitable transition. And so that just gives us flexibility. We have the DC fast charging covered through the federal dollars. We can focus on maybe level 2 charging for multifamily dwellings with the flexible dollars that we have in-house.
Great. So this is a question for both of you. Many of the authors of the plan have been working on your teams on transportation electrification for years. Do you have any insight as to what it was like for them to have the opportunity to work with the public to help guide this much funding? This is a lot of funding. Did it feel like the culmination of years of work, or kind of the start of a new era? And we've talked about that a little bit here already.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that, Josh. I think so. I mean, it's probably a little bit of a question for them as well. I know they're not. Sure. They're not on. But you're asking us as the leaders for these entities. I think so. I think there was probably a lot of excitement around having the opportunity to have webinars and engage key stakeholders, because there was a lot of interest. As soon as it came out, when people heard the term NEVI and they understood what the president and Congress were trying to achieve, I think it generated a lot of excitement. And I think probably a little bit of the excitement as well comes from the fact that the federal government, through DOE, Department of Energy, and DOT, were charged with leading this effort. And we decided we wanted to kind of mimic the same thing with CEC and Caltrans sort of being the two entities that were spearheaded. So the collaboration, the inner collaboration between state departments is also energizing. Not that the conflicts don't come up and issues don't arise. Sometimes we have to step in and say, okay, now look, let's just move forward in this format. But that inner collaboration and engaging stakeholders while sort of mimicking what the federal government's laid out as the approach to do this is such a great opportunity. And at the end of the day, what we're all here for is to make a difference for people. That's our ultimate responsibility. So the chance to get to engage them directly on this, I think I'm pretty sure was exciting for that team. But I'll note though that it's $384 million over 5 years, as you showed in your slide. It's roughly on average $77 million a year. It's a lot of money. Mm-hmm. It's more than, I think, Oregon over the entire lifetime of the plan is going to get 52 million. I think the state of Washington is going to get 77 million over the entire. And so we're going to get more on average annually than some of our neighboring states are going to get for the entire 5 years. But and the commissioner alluded to this already, the investments that we're making as a state more than dwarfs what the federal government's doing. I think the exciting thing about what the federal government's doing here is the coordination and the collaboration sort of requirements that is there. But you're talking 2.9 billion from CEC that was approved yesterday. Last month, it was 2.6 billion from CARB on the vehicle side. So you're talking about within the last 2 months, we've approved as a state more than $5.5 billion to go into the space. Now, we need to make sure that, and I know they're doing it. I know CEC and CARB are doing this. We need to make sure that money is spent as it should be, and spent appropriately according to the guidelines that have been set. But we're ahead of the country here. The exciting part about NEVI is the required coordination that we know will come out of it from our state and external states as well.
Yeah, that's great perspective. Prior in my career, I worked in California state government, so I know how important it is and sometimes challenging it is to do the coordination and the communication and the listening. So that's wonderful. Do you want to add anything, Commissioner?
I do. I mean, I actually want to start with some kudos to Secretary Omishakin, because I do feel, Tokes, like your leadership is, you come in with just like, let's get the job done. What's the easiest way to get the job done? And I feel like it's a kind of a breath of fresh air that in terms of, and to say nothing of this is not a ding on the previous secretary, but just this idea that, you know, we're all trying our best to support the state and to move forward on a clean energy agenda that also creates jobs and is good for the economy. And I think, you know, sometimes it can be hard to work across agencies. Agencies have different rules and structures, and there's, you know, and we're learning from the CEC sort of what the DOT world is like. We don't know it. And so it does take collaboration. I think it's coming from the top in terms of the secretary really giving that message about like, hey, let's just get the job done. And we're trying to do the same with our team. So thanks for being such a great partner, Tokes.
Thank you. No, thank you. Really appreciate you saying that.
Here, and congratulations.
Yeah, and I will say, you know, I'm really proud of the team that we have. Hanan Rasool, who heads the Fuels and Transportation Division, is just like a visionary, works crazy hard. Late at night, I'm texting him, he responds on a dime. So he's amazing. And Mark Wenzel, who leads our light duty infrastructure investments, is also just so dedicated and really always trying to problem solve and always trying to think out of the box and be creative. And so, you know, we have a great team. Actually, my former advisor, Ben De Alba, is the point for NEVI, and he's doing a great job in terms of navigating this world as well. So just, you know, we got a lot of rock stars. I think we need some women, more women in that little rock star, but just in terms of like a dedicated crew really working hard, I feel like, you know, we have it. And together with the historic investments that we have from the state and federal, I mean, the state and governor, that just gives us so much more maneuverability. And, you know, this idea of partnership, we have a partnership with the federal government, we have a partnership with Caltrans and CalSTA, and we're going to need everybody. We're going to need all hands on deck to reach our goals. And we got to break down organizational silos and egos. And it's about, as the secretary models, getting the job done.
That's great. I mean, I've heard it said that the effort that we are all collectively working on in terms of battling climate change is really, you know, an effort even bigger than the transformation to the industrial revolution. So it's an all hands on deck, everybody involved effort, and just really appreciate both of your leadership, specifically on the topic we're talking about today, and that is NEVI. So let's move on a little bit. So for those in our audience who haven't had the chance to read through the entire plan, I am hoping this next series of questions really helps demystify the California NEVI plan. Tokes and Patty, I'd like to pick your brain a little bit on key points that we need to know, both as folks in the industry, but as people who are going to be driving our EVs through these fast charging corridors. So what I'd like to do is go to you, Commissioner Monahan. Let's just get down to brass tacks. So where is this charging infrastructure going to be placed in California? We know that it's going to be related to probably the alt fuel corridors. Can you tell us what this means in layman's terms?
Well, I also want to start with some big picture. So, you know, the NEVI plan, as I said, fits into this framework of other investments that we're making as a state to meet the goal of zeroing out pollution from passenger vehicles by 2035 and for all forms of medium heavy duty by 2045. And of course, infrastructure is key, and that's particularly when it comes to equity. And I want to emphasize a report that we just published 2 weeks ago. It's this, we call it the ZIP, the Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Plan. And this is a report, one of the few reports that we didn't have to do, but we did actually at the request of CARB and other agencies to say like, hey, let's just have one place where all of the infrastructure plan is housed. And so folks should check the zip out if they want to get a more comprehensive view of sort of all the ways that we are thinking about infrastructure when it comes to meeting the state's goals. And the overall goal for this first deployment plan was to have convenient high-speed charging sufficient to facilitate long-distance travel for passenger vehicles. So that's number one. We need to enable the public to travel from point A to point B, whether it's for leisure, work, family, whatever, and to also do cross, not just within California, but outside of California, which is why the fact that this is national funding makes a big difference. And we're planning to do this in a way that serves disadvantaged communities, Justice 40 communities, which is the federal definition varies a little bit from ours, tribes and rural communities and regions, while making sure that we are minimizing harmful impacts to the grid, maintaining charging station reliability, which is a whole separate body of work, and connecting people to job opportunities that these projects are going to create in communities. So what we've proposed is a program that prioritizes corridors with the greatest need first. So those with the most need for DC fast charging, the most potential for increasing access in rural areas, disadvantaged communities, and tribes. So we've identified 20 corridor groups in total, and we're planning to fund a handful of corridor groups at a time when we've built out, to build new ones at a time until we've built out these corridors. And we want all of the chargers to be in disadvantaged and low-income communities and 40% to benefit Justice 40 communities. So that's our goal.
Great. So Patty, I'm going to keep picking on you if that's okay. A huge part of the current plan was the sheer amount of state agency coordination. We talked about that, the public engagement. We talked a little bit about that. The sub-working group, direct coordination with tribal organizations and frontline community groups. Is the 5-year deployment plan fully baked, the one that's out, or is it going to be an iterative process? I think a lot of people have that question.
Oh, it's iterative. Yeah, it's iterative. I think what most people don't realize is that we need to update California's NEVI plan annually to stay compliant. So this will definitely be an iterative process. I really think this is a good thing. The EV landscape is changing, and we're learning. I mean, I want to say we're coming from a base of knowledge, but charging is getting faster, vehicles are getting longer range, batteries are changing, charging is changing, and we want to be mindful of, both making investments today, not being afraid to make the investments, because we're going to limit the market. Right now, we have nearly 18% new vehicle sales being electric, and it's been, on the rise. We need to be ready for those new vehicles, but we also need to be nimble to the changing landscape and not be so rigid that we're just like, oh no, we're doing this. we're not going to be mindful of new data coming out. That's not how we want to proceed. So the first plan describes corridors for light duty charging. And once we've built that out in federally designated corridors, we have more flexibility about how to spend the rest. For example, for light duty charging along state routes that aren't part of the federal highway system, for medium and heavy duty vehicles, which some stakeholders are really interested in, or for charging away from these corridors.
Great. Plan, learn, optimize, I guess is the theory going forward, and that's great. So back to you, Secretary. It's funny because often funding is relegated to state borders, but transportation systems are national. Patty talked a little bit about this, but how did the creation of the plan take into account our shared borders and transportation systems? Do we have a history of cross-border electrification projects that we've leveraged?
Yeah, Josh, I was enjoying you picking on Patty there. I wasn't sure if you would come back to me. So look, I mentioned this before, that the really exciting part about this is the required coordination within our states, like key entities like CEC, CARB, GoBiz, Caltrans, CalSTA coming together to focus on this. But the bigger part of NEVI that is going to pay dividends long term is the coordination that's being required across the borders, beyond our borders. And the fact that the federal government is thinking about the range issues or the range anxiety concerns that people often have when they travel via automobile. They're looking at those regional issues. That's the vantage point that they have. So they're looking at Nevada, they're looking at Oregon and its connection to California. And the commissioner mentioned the corridors that are being targeted. It's all our alternative fuel corridors can get NEVI funding, even though we're specifically focusing on underserved and low-income communities at the onset here. That entire spine of alternative fuel corridors is eligible, or eligible, I should say. And in many cases, they're the ones that connect to bordering states. So if you're headed up to Eureka and Redding, headed up to Oregon, all the major interstate corridors headed up that way. If you're headed to Nevada, the same thing. So it's an entire spine. And the federal government, I think, has done a good job of making sure that the states are thinking regionally about the installation of and growing the charging network, not just what needs to happen within the borders of their state. And there's been some, even prior to NEVI, there have been some existing alliances, if you will, on the West Coast that included, all the way from Canada, British Columbia to Washington and Oregon and California. So some of those models exist already, and we're just kind of piggybacking, if you will, a little bit off of those existing alliances to grow the network through the NEVI plan.
Great. So Commissioner Monahan, I'm just going to be candid with you. Every day we hear a new program with ginormous amount of money, being invested into electrification. We talked a little bit about that earlier. The CEC's Clean Transportation Program has allocated about $44 million for light duty EV charging, $290 million for medium heavy duty infrastructure in the 22-23 fiscal year. There's $384 million from NEVI over 5 years, as I mentioned earlier. And the list goes on and on. I mean, one can get dizzy with excitement with all of these numbers. How will this new ZEV infrastructure funding complement the existing refueling infrastructure? And can you unpack it a little bit for us?
Yeah, it's a great question, Josh. And I gotta say, it is kind of crazy. Like what I said, we were handling $100 million per year, and now 2.9 billion, like 30 times. It's and you can get a little bit like cavalier about handling big amounts of money. What I want to emphasize is that the legislature and the governor have given us some of the money that we have. They've been very clear around, here are the priorities. And some of the priorities for the state money rather, have been drayage trucks. These trucks that travel between ports and distribution centers, go through communities, disproportionately impact low-income people of color. We really want to make sure we zero out pollution from those trucks. School buses carrying kids to school. This is like a real opportunity to make sure that as we carry kids and their developing lungs, we're doing it in the cleanest possible vehicles. Transit buses. So some of these priority areas are really staked out as funding, areas where we are required to fund those chargers. As our ZEV goals have grown, with Governor Newsom telling us you got to zero out pollution in the next 15 to 25 years, it's become clear that while vehicles used to be the biggest barrier, now it's infrastructure. And so, yes, it's unprecedented. Yes, it can make your head explode a little bit with the amount of money we're talking about, but is it the right amount? Do we have enough? I mean, I would argue probably not. Even with all this funding coming, we need to make sure that ports can electrify. We need to make sure, again, like if you live in an apartment building, that you feel confident that you could get an electric vehicle and you'll have a place to refuel it. And right now, I would say a lot of people don't feel confident. They just don't. I have friends and colleagues, my kids in college would be like, we can't have a charge in EV. I do, this is the amount of money to me is commensurate with both the challenge and the opportunity. And I do feel from a personal level, I mean, Josh knows, I've been in this space. I've been working on zero emission transportation for 30 years, which is crazy. I mean, I'm kind of old. And this is the moment. I have been waiting for this moment, and it's happening. We saw it happen in solar, where solar just, the market grew, it outcompeted in terms of price coal. And now it's much cheaper to do coal, to have solar and now we can do the same thing on the transportation side. So we're moving out of the pilot and demonstration phase into the deployment phase. And we need to make sure that there's infrastructure to be able to support that. I also want to just say one other quick grant program that we're managing, which I'm excited about, is for zero emission vehicle manufacturing and related. So we're giving out $250 million for ZEV manufacturing in state. Right now, California has more in-state ZEV manufacturing jobs than any state in the country. We want to keep it that way. So we're trying, not just in the vehicles themselves, but also in batteries, even in like extracting lithium from the Salton Sea region, looking at all opportunities to make California an epicenter for jobs, as well as the transit, as well as a model for the rest of the country on how we can zero out pollution from transportation.
Great. Well, 39 is the new 29, so you're killing it. But appreciate all of the years of experience and guidance. There's a lot of people in our audience who are basically waiting at the starting line, ready to tackle these projects. We hear anecdotally that companies have set up whole teams, whole strategic ops rooms, just getting ready for this NEVI funding. So folks are excited. It's a new era, as we spoke earlier. And I want to go next to you, Secretary. Caltrans is the overall steward of our transportation corridors, so they're intimately acquainted with how folks are traveling. How do you think about whether we will consider projects that augment existing sites as well as gap filling projects?
Yeah, it's great that, thanks, Josh. It's great that so many people, private, nonprofit, are chomping at the bits and ready to go on this funding. Again, it's not just the federal funding, the $384 million, but the immense amount of money that CEC and Commissioner Monahan and their team there is going to oversee from the state side. As to your question about existing sites and new locations, we're going to do both. We're going to focus on, no doubt, making sure that we fill the gaps, if you will, on those alternative fuel corridors, and install and put in charging where it doesn't exist today. We're up to 80,000 chargers. I'm not sure if people are familiar with that, but there are roughly 80,000 chargers in California. We're more than a third of the charging network that existing in the entire country. But with the money, and I keep referencing the state money because it's just mind-boggling sometimes when I think about it. But with the money that CEC is now going to oversee, the goal is going to be within the next few years to get an additional 90,000 chargers onto the roadways and the transportation system of the state, on top of the 80,000 that we already have. So there's going to be tremendous opportunity with the state funds and the federal funds that are going to be coming down. But to a little bit more of your question, the more exciting part of this for me is the fact that we're going to be paying specific attention to underserved communities. And those underserved communities could easily be in urban, high density areas, because we know that happens, no doubt. And when we say underserved, it could be low income, it could be from a environmental standpoint, it could be from a race standpoint. And also, it could also mean, in some cases, rural communities that have been overlooked or underserved. But to me, that's the exciting part, is that we've done the mapping, we've looked at the entire state to see, okay, where is existing infrastructure? And we know, without a doubt, there's a deficit in underserved communities. And the fact that we're going to try to make sure that 40% of the federal funds can somehow impact those underserved communities with all of our equity outlook, all of us are focused more on that. I think it's pretty exciting. So to answer your question, we're definitely going to do both new sites. We're going to do existing locations. But the key thing for me that I'm pumped up about is to see the change that's going to happen in rural communities where sometimes gas stations or fueling stations or energy stations are so far apart, and urban low-income communities that when we think about ZEVs and we think about charging infrastructure, we know for a fact, not just anecdotally, we know for a fact they're not there. And this money is requiring us to do it. And the state money, we're going to try to do that as well.
Great. Well, I know the time is moving along quickly, but I'm going to move us to you, Commissioner Monahan. The Energy Commission has administered $1 billion in projects to date through the Clean Transportation Program. Are you going to be the lead agency for the NEVI competitive proposals? Talk to us at a high level about when you expect the solicitation to go out, and if you're able to project from there when the first projects will go into groundbreaking.
Well, we are waiting for the federal government actually hasn't finalized their guidance yet. So we're waiting for the federal government to finalize their guidance. Once the guidance is finalized, we're going to be ready to swing into action. I think, there needs to be some, close coordination and with Caltrans and CalSTA in terms of just making sure that we have the right agreements, cross-agency agreements in place to be able to move rapidly. But we can't do those cross-agency agreements until we see what the federal guidance is. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, that'll happen.
Great. And Secretary, I understand that you have to depart soon, so I just want to get in one last question here. It's more than just folks putting in chargers for this program. How can the other parts of the ecosystem get ready for this rollout?
Yeah, I've got till, Josh, I've got to 10:50. I need to log on.
Great.
Yeah, I need to log on to, 11:50 rather. I need to log on to another a webinar that I'm going to be giving a talk on as well. I think the main thing to keep in mind, specifically on the NEVI front, again, there are multiple sides. This CARB is focused on the sort of vehicle and people side, whereas CEC is focused very much on the infrastructure component of where we're headed. But if people are interested in the NEVI specific part, that is a little bit of both, but probably more the infrastructure side. The I in NEVI is infrastructure. I would say for sure read the plan. Check out the plan. It's on the Caltrans's website. It's linked from CEC's website as well. See what some of the requirements are. See what we were thinking about when we set the framework, sort of what our priorities were, and establishing our NEVI, because each state is a little different. Not all the states are the same. And see what corridors we're sort of prioritizing. The alternative fuel corridors, I think in California, we have maybe 33 or 34 existing, and we have another 17 corridors that are pending approval from the federal government that we hopefully will be able to put ZEV infrastructure on as well. So for sure, check out the NEVI plan for California if you haven't already, whether you're a nonprofit or for profit or looking to engage that plan out there. You can just do a search for California NEVI plan, and it should just come right up. And if you're not directly connected to Veloz already, try to get Josh's personal email and his cell phone number and call him and nag him and say, we need info. But anyway, that's what I would recommend, is definitely starting with the plan.
Great. Well, Commissioner Monahan and Secretary Omishakin, we know you're both moving mountains in your careers, but we'd like to take a moment for our audience to get to know you a little bit better on a personal level. So I've got a question that literally has nothing to do with transportation electrification. We hope to have a little fun. So when you're not building bridges, fixing roads, solving climate change, funding zero emission, infrastructure, what is your favorite thing to do when you have free time? And let's start with you, Patty, and then we'll go to Tokes.
Okay, so my old favorite thing to do was play basketball. I was really obsessive with basketball, one would say. But when I turned 50, I was afraid. I saw all these women like falling down and breaking things. And I was like, I want to go out walking. So now I'm obsessed with cycling because I think I've got a little chip that says you've got to exercise all the time. And so now I cycle. It's super dangerous. I don't recommend it, but it's a lot of fun.
Wonderful. And what about you, Secretary?
Oh, that's really good. Commissioner there on the basketball. I didn't know that. I
Oh,
played.
can I just say my nickname used to be Patty Ainge, which you may appreciate. And I think it was an insult because he was kind of a dirty player, but he was also very scrappy. So I'm taking the scrappy side.
I actually like that. That's he played for did he play for Celtics? Danny? You're talking about Danny? Oh yeah.
Yeah, Danny Ainge.
I played 1 year of college basketball, so I didn't know that. We're gonna have to play.
What?
Yeah. It was
I played college basketball too. So anyway, all right, we got a game on, Secretary.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, we got to get a pickup in. For me, it's I'm a bit of a fitness fanatic as well. I knew I was a terrible basketball player, at least in my own sight, and just switched to fitness. So everything from cycling to running to lifting weights, I do the whole thing. So if I'm not there, I'm either watching a movie or at a sports event with my kids. The daughter plays basketball as well, and son's a big soccer player. So either family or fitness.
Wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to slide in one more, and it can be a one-word answer. We have an audience that wants to ask you a question or two. So here's my final question to you. You're on vacation, you go into a bar or cafe. What is your go-to food or drink?
You go, Tokes.
Grilled salmon.
Oh, I'm hungry. That sounds good. Patty.
I mean, I do love a margarita, so I'm gonna go with that.
Wonderful. Well, I'd like to take this moment to invite my colleague Muni Krishna back on screen, who's going to help us walk through some of the Q&A. Secretary, when you need to depart, go ahead, but hopefully you'll have a moment for a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me. And Secretary and Commissioner, Josh put you on the spot for this past hour, so I'm hoping to do the same back to him right now as well a little bit. Unfortunately, our first question is kind of a big one, and I'm directed to you, Commissioner Monahan. It's pretty easy to look at this like it's a full-on infrastructure project, but data collection and reliability are going to be key parts for consumer satisfaction. Can you briefly mention some of the efforts on reliability?
Yeah, well, it really is important to make sure that there's a positive consumer experience. And I think there's too many times when you go to a charger and you can't figure out the app and you're confused by how to charge, and then you're unsuccessful and you got to go to a different charger. I've had this experience. And, we are increasingly adding reliability requirements to the chargers that we fund. We're looking at a broader set of actions that we can take. The new federal funding will have uptime requirements as well, which we will align with and potentially go beyond. And we're looking at different studies because there's a lot of anecdotal data, but not hard data on charger reliability. So we're looking at funding more work to evaluate what the real world experience is, not just with the chargers we fund, but with the broader network.
Great. So Josh, this next one is posed a little bit to you. As you well know, EV education and outreach to consumers is still at a critical phase in California with equity at the forefront. Federal funds coming into California could also be allocated to educational efforts around EV adoption and charging, going more than the belief that if you build it, they will come. Can you talk to us a little bit about how consumer education could be considered in this EV infrastructure funding cycle, specifically even in environmentally impacted communities?
Yeah, well, as many on this call know, Veloz is all about EV education and awareness, and we are currently managing and implementing our Busting Myths campaign. And what we're learning is that although we're seeing more automakers, put out amazing ads on performance in their particular models, there are more questions, and they're coming fast and furious as it relates to where do I charge, how do I charge, how do I get money, where do I get charging infrastructure, how do I install home charging infrastructure? And so, thank you, Tokes. It looks like you're signing out. So I think there's a huge opportunity to continue some of the work that we are doing and the work that many of the folks on the call are doing as it relates to EV education and outreach. I think it's going to become increasingly important. And I think as NEVI funding comes down, it's really important that we get the installs and the charging right. And that we couple that with providing people with answers to all the questions they have around not only the infrastructure, but also EVs.
Great. Commissioner Monahan, this whole thing's an infrastructure problem. So can you talk to us a little bit about permitting and whether that's an issue right now, what states, what local municipalities and people in the audience that are getting ready for this to come through their building departments, what they can do to get ready for this project?
I mean, permit streamline, there are some localities that have permit streamlining for EVs. There was actually legislation that requires it writ large across the state, but it really makes a difference when local cities have permit streamlining for EV chargers. I would emphasize too, though, it's not just, it's also working with the local utility and making sure there's power and it can be energized. And I think that, there's work that we need to do as a state to be able to accelerate the timeline for deploying EV charging infrastructure. And there are some barriers. Local permitting is one, utility and interface and prioritization at the utility, I think would be another one. And I don't mean to just like pile onto utilities. I think they face a lot of challenges right now in terms of just wildfire resilience, distribution grids, energy writ large. So, but it's, we all need to work together to be able to overcome some of these barriers and speed the timeline for deployment.
Great. Josh, do folks like Veloz have an opportunity here to communicate the California NEVI results to the public and educate them about the usefulness and availability of the infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, I think that starts with today. One of the very reasons we're hosting today's digital dialogue on California's NEVI plan is to really get information out there and coordinate with state agencies like Patty's and Tokes in terms of making sure people understand the timelines, the funding that's coming, how to apply, and if there are any issues, how to get a hold of the folks that are in the operations centers in those agencies. So I certainly think there's huge opportunity for all of those on today's digital dialogue, but also to use Veloz as a conduit for answers.
Great. Commissioner Monahan, I've got one last question for you. Unfortunately, it's kind of a big one, which is in talking about medium and heavy duty infrastructures, that's going to be required. How is there a percentage of NEVI funding that's going to be put aside? Are we looking at it as the framework for the future? How does that work?
I'm sorry, can you say that again? I got confused.
Of course. So as it comes to the infrastructure that's required for medium and heavy duty charging that's coming up in the future, is that part of this current phase of NEVI?
Oh, I see what the question is. No, right now, at least for the current plan, we're focusing on light duty. It doesn't mean going, in a future year, we could pivot to medium to heavy duty, but right now our because we have funding from the state for medium and heavy duty, we're focusing on just light duty charging in the near term.
Great. All right. On that note, I will excuse myself from the screen and pass it back to you, Josh.
Thank you, Mooney, and thank you, Commissioner Monahan, for today's discussion. I have a few closeout slides. You're welcome to stay with us if you like, but I encourage all participants to hang on just for a few minutes as we tell you what we're up to. So as many of you know, we recently launched our brand new public ZEV education campaign called Myths Busting Myths, a funny character-driven series of video spots really designed to educate consumers and bust the myths around owning and operating an electric vehicle. These spots are edgy, humorous, and memorable. EVs are for everyone, and this campaign was designed to bring everyone into the conversation. So if you haven't already, check out the campaign spots at electricforall.org and be sure to subscribe to our newsletter for the campaign updates. We have a lot of great content and programming coming for you next year. Veloz's 2023 roster of digital dialogues and summits are all available at veloz.org. Starting off with our first virtual summit of the year will be in March of 2023. We're looking forward to broadening the conversation on transportation electrification by including electric VTOL, electric school buses, and even micromobility. Check out our website to see all those topics, see the description. You can register to attend, and don't hesitate to reach out with suggestions for speakers or organizations that should participate. As always, we encourage you to share, like, follow our various social media handles so you're up to date not only on our latest news, but also that of our member organizations. Veloz's 40+ members represent a diverse section of all parts of the EV ecosystem. So be sure to follow us to keep up to date with the latest news from auto OEMs, charging providers, utilities, community groups, ride shares, nonprofits, and many more. On behalf of the Veloz team, we want to say a very special thank you to the folks at the California State Transportation Agency and the California Energy Commission for working with us today to create today's dynamic conversation. Also, a special thank you to Veloz's own Muni Krishna for developing the strategic content for today's digital dialogue. Finally, thank you to everyone in our audience for joining us in today's discussion. We hope to see you on our next summit so we can continue to have these important conversations. As we sign off, the entire Veloz team wishes you all and your families and your loved ones a wonderful holiday and a happy new year. Thank you.